Chapter 246 Strange Omen. Aaron and Talim left the Quelaag Club after they separately completed the nomination form. It wasn't a weekend. The former had 2 more operations in the afternoon, and the latter had to teach Viscount Conrad's youngest son horse riding. The teenager needed to ensure that he didn't embarrass himself during the Backland social events in the second half of the year. Klein watched the valet, dressed in a red vest, and a maid in a beautiful dress come and go a few times before finally delivering him his own proof of membership and a badge with the symbol of the Frost constellation engraved on it. The valet in the red vest pushed the 2 objects to Klein.
An entry fee of £50. There are still 3.5 months left this year, with an annual fee of £4 a year.
Klein took out the £57 which Mary Gale had given him and handed him £54. The amount beyond the entry fee and annual fee was Mary's first payment. She was very pleased with how quickly Klein obtained information on Doragu Gale's mistress, as well as her photo.
£50 membership. Madam Mary is such a generous lady.
While Klein watched the valet and the maid verify the money and confirm the exact amount, he recalled Stellan Sammer's private introduction. Mary's father was a co-founder of the Coim Company and had a 20% stake. It was originally just a small company that barely made money, but as Backland's pollution worsened and the demand for anthracite and charcoal increased, the company rapidly expanded to become one of the top 10 companies in the capital's industry. As such, Mary's net worth skyrocketed. The only problem was that when she was married to Doragu Gale, the company was still quite an unknown company. Her father hadn't paid much attention to using the shares as her dowry and didn't proceed with any protection of estate gifting, and had instead used the more popular willing of gifts. The former referred to the dowry as an independent and separate estate of the woman and not subjected to her husband's control. Even the right of use depended on the woman, while the latter assigned the dowry's ownership to the entire family. However, the husband had to immediately make a valid will to promise that if he passed away before his partner, the split of the estate would be 2 to 4 times the rights and interests of the dowry received, after which the rest would proceed according to the normal inheritance laws which could effectively guarantee the livelihood of the widow. If Mary initiated a divorce before she could get evidence of Doragu's adultery, the Coim Company shares would be divided equally between both parties. Klein remembered Stellan saying enviously,
"The current value of those shares is currently close to 20,000 gold pounds. Adding the other property in their name, Mary is a truly wealthy lady. Once she's divorced, she will definitely become the target of many men in Backland, including some nobles."
That's only enough money for Miss Justice to assassinate Ambassador Bakerland twice.
Klein suddenly thought about that when he saw the red-vested valet and the good-looking maid bow at him.
Mr. Moriarty, welcome to the Quelaag Club.
Upon hearing this, Klein picked up the proof of membership and the Frost badge. The former was made of elastic paper, which looked like a card with Klein's name and his membership start date on it. After applying an imprint of his index finger, the proof of membership was officially ready for use. The latter was the Quelaag Club's distinctive badge, named for its founding in early November, which corresponded to the month of the Frost constellation. The symbol and the number 192 were printed on the front, followed by Sherlock Moriarty imprinted on the back. Klein asked casually,
The club now has 192 members?
The red-vested valet beamed and introduced,
Yes, our club doesn't accept people without a recommendation. On the first floor, there's a buffet cafeteria, bar, library, squash room, conference room, and card room. You can use them all for free. The food and wine are free for your sampling as well. There are 16 lounge rooms and 2 small conference rooms on the second floor. They are also free and can be used as long as they aren't occupied.
The good-looking maid pointed to the rear and said, There are 2 tennis courts on the lawn, totally free of charge. There are 2 shooting ranges underground, and you only need to pay the corresponding rental fee of the equipment. If you aren't satisfied with the simple buffet, you can order a la carte. We have an exclusive chef, and you just need to pay for the ingredients.
Board, lodging, and entertainment are all provided for, as expected of a high-end club.
Klein sincerely thanked Mrs. Mary. He smiled warmly and said,
Send someone to show me around so that I can familiarize myself with the environment. Afterward, give me a lounge to take an afternoon nap.
All right.
The red-vested valet made an inviting gesture. After familiarizing himself with the Quelaag Club's environment, Klein entered a lounge and carefully studied the layout of the place. He discovered it was similar to a hotel room of the later generation. It was said to be decorated in the Inta style.
I have to consider how to obtain evidence of Dorgu's affair tomorrow. It's simply impossible to hide the flash of the camera. In other words, I only have one shot at taking a picture, and if I do that, I'll definitely be kicked out of the club. I have to think of a safe way. I'll read through the papers later and try to determine the progress regarding Ian's case through the news. From there, I can determine which 3 days I should be guarded.
Klein paced back and forth, lost in thought. At that moment, his heart suddenly palpitated as he tensed up.
Is this the premonition of a clown? However, there are no scenes in my mind.
Klein felt the air around him turn still, like it was the calm before the storm. Soon, this feeling disappeared, as if nothing had happened.
Could it be that danger is approaching? But nothing like this happened when I was attacked by Morceau.
Puzzled, Klein pulled out a coin and divined if he would be attacked in the next few days. The answer was negative. After thinking for a few seconds, Klein drew the curtains and pretended to take an afternoon nap. He took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the gray fog. He sat down and pondered for a long time, before muttering to himself,
I will be in grave danger in the next few days.
After repeating the statement, he flicked the coin again and saw the copper-colored object tumble down and land in his open palm. This time, the portrait of the king was facing up. It meant a positive result.
My reaction just now really was an omen that danger is coming.
Klein narrowed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. He was rather puzzled by this matter.
Whether it was as a seer or clown, they had never displayed such abilities before. Even if they could predict danger, it was because the target was right in front of him or beside him. There was nobody around me. From the fact that my divination was misled, it must have involved a relatively higher sequencer, most likely Bakerland's assistant. In the end, it actually gave me a premonition? This isn't scientific. This doesn't make mystical sense. There must be something else behind it, but I can't be certain why yet.
Klein looked around and saw the boundless fog, crimson and still, the palace standing as it had always stood. He reined in his doubts and temporarily stopped thinking about the reason. Instead, he focused his attention on the attack that was about to occur. After several more divinations, Klein found that he could only confirm that there would be great danger in the next few days. It couldn't be shortened to 3 days, 2 days, or even 5 hours. In other words, he could only obtain a somewhat vague revelation. And in a dream divination, he saw Ian dressed in his old coat, standing in the street with the elegant gas lamps and the blurry crimson moon behind him. Other than this image, there was nothing else. Klein thought for a moment.
How should I interpret this?
He could only assume that this was the prelude to danger. Without further delay, he returned to the real world, left the Quelaag Club, and went to the nearby Hillston branch of the Backland Bank to withdraw the remaining £100 from his account. The sum of £1,000 from Justice hasn't been cleared yet and reconciled. Without the corresponding information sent to the branches, the account wasn't synchronized, and, theoretically speaking, there was a loophole. Klein could withdraw £100 from another branch and seize the opportunity when all the accounts were out of sync. However, this was only in theory. In order to avoid similar acts, the banks had many rules on anonymous accounts. First, it was to enhance the transmission of similar information in the same city. Second, it was to limit a single withdrawal to no more than £500. And third, if the last withdrawal wasn't done locally, a telegram was needed to inquire about it. And today, Klein encountered the third situation. Putting away the money, he took a horse carriage to the Backland Bridge area and entered the Bravehearts bar. Under Casper's guidance, he saw Merrick sitting in the card room. He wasn't surrounded by zombies. Klein discarded the idea of using his spirituality to wrap Isaac's copper whistle, slapped a 100 pounds on the table, and said to the pale Merrick,
I agree to the deal. I'll pay an advance of 100 pounds. I'll pay another 300 pounds every additional day I'm protected. The protection begins now.
Merrick's gaze fell past him and landed somewhere behind him. He nodded and said,
All right, she has agreed.
Huh?
Klein turned back in surprise, only to see the wall and nothing but air. He secretly activated his spirit vision, but failed to discover anything. Merrick stuffed the 100 pounds into his pocket and said indifferently,
You can return now. She has begun protecting you, in a hidden way.
If I hadn't divined this beforehand, I would definitely think of all of you as cheats.
Klein surveyed his surroundings and deliberately acted as though he left with clenched teeth. Along the way, he would occasionally activate and deactivate his spirit vision, constantly observing the outside through the carriage windows. But he didn't find his so-called bodyguard. Back at 15 Minsk Street, Klein closed the door, went into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and washed his hands. The sound of water splashing disappeared as he shook off the water droplets and wiped his palms with a towel. Then, he raised his head to look at himself in the mirror to inspect his appearance. At this moment, he saw himself phasing away in the mirror before transforming into a woman wearing a black regal dress. The woman had light golden hair and blue eyes. She looked very delicate, but her face was abnormally pale. She wore a small black bonnet, lifted her skirt, and bowed at Klein.
This.
Without hiding his surprise, Klein took a few steps back and leaned against the wall. Only then did he realize that this might be the bodyguard he had hired for 1,000 pounds. The image in the mirror quickly dimmed, and Klein saw himself again. Everything had been restored back to normal. Chapter 247, The Whole Story. The figure in the mirror was clear, but it was as though the woman in the black regal dress had never appeared. Klein secretly activated his spirit vision, but didn't find anything.
Did I just hire a female ghost as my bodyguard? She's even stranger than a female ghost. At the very least, one can see ghosts with spirit vision.
Klein thoughtfully touched Isaac's copper whistle in his pocket, feeling nothing but its cold chill. Like before, it didn't have any additional changes.
She's unaffected by the copper whistle. Seems like she isn't an undead creature. However, I can't be sure. Back then, the copper whistle was buried with me, but the corpses surrounding me didn't act abnormally. Was it because those buried in the cemetery have experienced a send-off by the priests and bishops? When does it work and when doesn't it? When his business with the ambassador is over, and if I'm still alive, I'll go to the cemetery and try to figure out the scope of its effect and its limits. I can't always carry a time bomb like this.
Klein washed his face and walked out of the bathroom. Just as he picked up the newspaper in the living room and was going to read it in the living room or bedroom, he heard the doorbell ring. Klein's mind tensed up when he heard the tinkling sounds. He put on his coat with all kinds of materials in it and walked towards the door gingerly. He clearly knew that danger was approaching in the next few days. After standing behind the door and waiting for a moment, the scene outside naturally surfaced in Klein's mind. The crimson moon was faintly discernible in the sky. The elegant gas lamps on both sides of the street lit up the wet road. A boy wearing an old coat stood there. His bright red eyes were deep and adrift.
Ian Wright. Why did he appear? Isn't this what I saw in my dream divination? Is this the prelude to danger?
Klein opened the door and took 2 cautious steps back. Ian took off his brown top hat, bowed, and said in a low voice,
Detective Moriarty, I came to apologize. I'm sorry to have involved you in such a dangerous matter.
Klein creased his eyebrows and probed.
What you should have done is head to the police station.
Ian looked around and bowed his head.
I just came out from MI9.
Is that the name of the military's special department?
Klein stepped aside, pointed at the living room, and said,
Maybe we can have a chat. No, I have to at least know what placed me in this situation.
He sighed inwardly. Ian didn't stand on ceremony as he followed Klein into the living room and sat in the same spot as he did the last time. He was just about to open his mouth when Klein suddenly added,
If what you plan on saying will put me in greater danger, then there's no need to tell me about it.
No, everything will soon be over.
Ian had a calmness that was beyond his age. Klein was relieved and asked out of curiosity.
So what exactly happened?
Before he could finish his sentence, he saw a figure emerge from the panes of the oriel window across the room. A black regal dress, long hair tied in a bun, blue eyes, delicate features, and a pale face. It was the woman who had previously greeted Klein in the mirror. This woman seemed to find an illusory high-backed chair and sat down. Her left palm supported her right elbow, while her right hand supported her face, pretending to listen attentively while appearing expressionless. For a moment, Klein was left at a loss. Ian, who had been silent for a few seconds, said softly,
In fact, Detective Zriel is a spy for the Fasak Empire. He adopted several vagrant children and taught them how to gather intelligence. I am one of them.
So that's how it is. I was involved in a huge spy conspiracy.
Klein suddenly felt enlightened. Ian looked at the coffee table and continued.
We have the advantage of age and are often ignored by others, allowing us to gather a lot of useful information. 2 weeks ago, I stumbled upon clues regarding Helma Suin's manuscript.
Helma Suin?
Klein found the name familiar. Ian looked up at him and explained.
Turani von Helma Suin, the greatest scientist after Emperor Roselle, a mathematician, a mechanist, and the father of the second-generation difference engine.
So it's him.
Klein suddenly remembered the relevant information. He wasn't only a great scientist, but also a crazy scientist. He believed that the inherent flaw in the existence of humans could only be fixed through machines. He loved eating sugar as if it was his own energy source. He mysteriously disappeared while researching a third-generation difference engine and was an important figure that every country was trying to find. Klein asked probingly,
His manuscript? Does the manuscript involve third-generation difference engines?
A difference engine was a mechanical device for computing. It could effectively improve the efficiency of scientific research and various projects. In Klein's opinion, it was an alternative computer in the age of steam. Of course, it could only do computation at present. Ian shook his head.
I'm not sure, I didn't actually see it, perhaps. It had some related ideas.
He paused for a moment, then went on to recount what had happened.
When I reported this to Detective Zriel, he was very happy and told me to follow up on that lead while he immediately reported it to his superior. It took me some time to determine where the manuscript was, but I was afraid of the danger, so I didn't steal it directly. I decided to return to Detective Zriel, and after that, it was as I told you. Detective Zriel's house was infiltrated while many of the tiny traps were not restored, and he didn't respond to my contact request. The Zemanger gang tried to capture me. With your help, I confirmed the death of Detective Zriel. I took a fake tooth from his corpse. Oh, that happened after we parted. Detective Zriel told me that, inscribed on the inside of the fake tooth, there was a method to urgently contact his superior. It was a method that even he didn't know of, and was something he would only remove if an accident occurred.
Klein nodded slightly and said,
So you sent a telegram?
A rare look of surprise flashed across Ian's face as he asked,
Did the people from MI9 tell you that?
No, a friend of mine happened to see you on Bacardi Street.
Klein casually made up an excuse.
I see. I got in touch with Detective Zriel's superior in Backland via telegram and arranged the time, place, and manner of meeting, but soon enough, I was found by the Zemanger gang. No, to be exact, it was an intelligence officer of the Intis Republic. That was what the people from MI9 people told me. Fortunately, MI9 arrived in time, and both sides engaged in a chaotic battle. I took this opportunity to escape. However, when I met with Detective Zriel's superior this afternoon, I was once again ambushed by the Intis intelligence officers. Unfortunately, I was caught by them, and I was very afraid of dying, so I told them everything that I knew. However, they didn't keep their promise and still wanted to kill me. At that moment, MI9 finally found me.
It is only during such times when you look like a 15 or 16-year-old teenager. Just as Klein was reflecting over this, he suddenly thought of a problem from what Ian had just said. Back when he discovered that something important was left behind on Zriel's corpse and that Ian had successfully taken it away, he had written the matter off, thinking that the Beyonder was lacking in skill, and that the Beyonder had missed out on something because the mediumship provided little useful information. However, after confirming that the ambassador had a mid-sequence Beyonder of the seer pathway, the situation became extremely peculiar. With powerful mediumship, it was impossible for the fake tooth to not be discovered. Leaving the body in such a remote and hard-to-find place didn't seem like a trap. Combined with Ian's description, the answer was obvious. Klein nodded and said,
Have you ever thought of the possibility that Zriel's superior has traitors around him? A traitor who has defected to the Intis intelligence services? That's also why Zriel was exposed and killed when he obtained the clue to the manuscript, as well as why you were ambushed.
It was because the Intis ambassador had information about Zriel's superior, which was why he didn't pay much attention to the urgent communication method inscribed on the inside of the tooth. Zriel's report to his superior directly led to his demise. Ian fell into a daze when he heard that. It took him quite a while before he clenched his fists in anger, trying hard to compose himself as he said,
I didn't think of that. You really are an excellent detective.
He quietly let out a breath of air and changed the topic.
I have divulged the whereabouts of the manuscript to MI9 and everything else. They also mentioned your predicament in passing. Heh, they didn't suspect me of lying, nor did they send anyone to watch me. All of them went to vie for the manuscript. However, with that kind of pressure, no one can lie.
Having said that, Ian stood up and gave a deep bow.
Please allow me to apologize again. Sorry to have involved you in this. Actually, you don't need to hide anything from me.
Having understood the entire situation, Klein smiled and said,
No, the main problem in this matter was because I made a mistake that made me end up in my current situation.
As he was listening, he used Ian's description of the entire situation and his reflections of the past few days and confirmed that he had made two mistakes.
When I discovered that Ian's matter ran deeper than it appeared, I still accepted the request. That wasn't a problem since I only felt that it involved gangs, and there would be, at most, 1 or 2 Beyonders who wouldn't dare expose themselves. But the divination lacked enough information and ended with a failure. This was within the limits of what I could have resolved by myself, and typically speaking, there wouldn't have been any trouble. I could even take the opportunity to come into contact with Backlund's Beyonders. After finding Zuriel's corpse and confirming that the matter ran deep, I should have considered the sensitivity of my identity and decisively extricated myself from this case. I should have let Ian deal with the subsequent matters himself. This wouldn't be problematic and would be a rather careful choice. One of the mistakes I made was that I didn't flinch or reveal anything about Ian when Meursault came to me. I only thought that he was from a gang, and that there were some Beyonders behind that gang. Who would have guessed that it would involve a figure like the Intis ambassador? Even more so, I never expected Meursault to be so rash. After failing his mission, he didn't threaten, intimidate me, or proceed with other options. Instead, he came straight to kill me so that mediumship could be performed. He didn't even give me the chance to regret my decision. As a result, my situation worsened. Show, this isn't too subjective or too serious a mistake. Show, the one mistake that really caused me to be in such a passive situation was a tiny mistake I made from the very beginning. I had rented the house and accepted the mission as Sherlock Moriarty without donning a disguise. This resulted in me not being able to flee after my identity as a Beyonder was exposed to the ambassador. Even as I acted horrified and frantic, making MI9 and the police department believe that my taking flight would only be normal, I didn't dare flee. I was afraid that when the ambassador failed to find a target for revenge, he would inform the officials about me. And according to my experience as a Nighthawk, most official enforcers like the Nighthawks, Machinery Hive Mind, and mandated punishers harbor animosity towards uncontrolled Beyonders. They definitely wouldn't ignore me just because I'm a low-sequence Beyonder and would begin an investigation. In time, my looks will be clear evidence. I will then be pursued by high-sequence Beyonders from the Church of the Goddess, because I resurrected despite having been involved with a Grade 0 sealed artifact. There's no chance for such matters to be suddenly forgotten or thought of as nothing by others. I had to plan for the worst-case scenario in advance, and if I only reacted when the ambassador took action, it would definitely be too late. Whether it's an assassination, finding a bodyguard, or buying items, all of them will require time. Only if the ambassador and his assistant dies, or attention is diverted to the investigation of his death, will I be able to resolve this latent danger. His assistant doesn't have an official status, so he can't interact with the officials. For a mere Sequence 9 or Sequence 8 at best, someone whose whereabouts are unknown, there's no reason to go through the effort to report me. Of course, his death is the best outcome, then there won't be any latent danger. Compared to finding Mr. Azek for help, or having attention placed on me because of 008 again, as well as being pursued by high-sequence beyonders, assassinating the ambassador is the relatively simpler choice. Even if it fails, I can only bear one of the two outcomes. Sigh. Everything originated from a small oversight at the beginning. I just imagined that in a metropolis with over 5 million people and few people knowing me while I deliberately avoided the Nighthawks, there was no need for me to don a disguise every day, since it would be easier for others to notice something amiss. Yet, for such a small mistake, I would have to pay over 10,000 gold pounds as the price, without having any guarantee of resolving it. I'm really like a clown, with one mistake triggering a chain reaction, only to result in a desperate attempt to balance myself so as to please the audience. This is all because of my lack of experience. This is the first time in my 2 lifetimes combined that I've ever been a fugitive. Alias Velas. Once this matter is completely resolved, exposing my identity as a Beyonder would no longer be that dangerous. They would only think that I obtained a potion while finding a bodyguard and not doubt my origins. Of course, I'll have to get used to wearing glasses and a mustache in the future, so that the people around me will gradually get used to my new image. In the future, when they ask me about me, they will only think of this new image.
Having thought through the entire matter, Klein's laugh became more pronounced, making Ian feel strange.
It's time for me to leave. I'll need to disappear for a while. Otherwise, I might be thrown into jail.
Ian put on his hat, bade farewell, and left. Klein didn't stop him, watching him disappear into the crimson moonlight, while the woman by the oriel window had disappeared without him realizing it. Chapter 248. Waiting from both sides. With both sides being aware of the whereabouts of Helmosuen's manuscript, this matter would come to an end tonight. Therefore, the ambassador would have the freedom to take revenge.
Is this the reason for the impending danger?
Klein gained a rough understanding of the divination results and the inexplicable omen. If he didn't have the language of foulness charm or the powerful bodyguard that cost him 1,000 pounds for 3 days, he would have shamelessly gone to the police station or the church of the god of steam and machinery's headquarters in Backland St. Hireland Cathedral for a temporary stay. He could avoid any possible attacks and await the assassination of the ambassador. As for how successful the assassination would be, Klein wasn't confident either. He had already considered the worst outcome and had a plan for it, but now, with double the preparations, he no longer wanted to avoid it. He would stay at home and pretend that he knew nothing. Deep down, he was even looking forward to having his attackers come knocking at his door.
Sequence 9, Hunter Merceau was killed by me. If they send someone else again, they would at least be a Sequence 7, or even a Sequence 6 or 5. They might even come in numbers. But regardless, as long as I finish them, I'll obtain formulas and Beyonder characteristics. I can then make up for some of my losses. Yes, I'll tell Miss Bodyguard that I had good luck and managed to benefit from the black ear that I bought and became a Beyonder. After all, when the battle becomes intense, there's no way to hide it at that point. Besides, what I'm saying is nearly the truth. I did benefit quite significantly from the black ear.
As Klein considered what would soon follow, he almost instinctively drew the sign of the crimson moon on his chest. He prayed silently.
May the goddess bless me that the Beyonder who comes is the one from the seer pathway?
As he thought of this, he looked around the room for his bodyguard. He was worried that she would run away without a sound after hearing the whole story. The lights in the dining room were warm, illuminating the coffee table, sofa, and chairs. There was no one else in the room except him. As Klein gradually grew nervous, he suddenly saw a face appear on the glass cover of the gas lamp in the living room. The face was pale, with pale gold hair and delicate looks.
This lady is quite confident in her own strength.
Klein's mind calmed down, and he whispered to himself.
I'm also a Beyonder. I made a gamble on an item I bought from Kaspar's gathering and benefited from it, but it was only beneficial for me.
What he said was true. No matter what method he had to face, these sentences would endure a truth test. But when these two sentences were put together, one would think that the benefits made him a Beyonder. The face on the glass cover nodded slightly and quickly disappeared without any other reaction. Klein's expression didn't seem to change, but he secretly exhaled in his heart. Without taking off his coat, he went back to the sofa and picked up a newspaper and started reading. After a while, the tinkling sound echoed again. Someone had rung his doorbell again.
Who is it?
Klein immediately tensed up. He stuffed his hands into his pockets, touching his tarot cards and language of foulness charm. He slowly walked towards the door, and with the help of his abilities as a clown, he predicted what he would see after opening the door. The crimson moon was still faintly visible, the elegant gas lamps were unchanged, and a sergeant in a black and white checkered uniform with 3 chevrons on his epaulets was impatiently waiting by the door. He had a short, brown beard, and he was none other than the sergeant who had dealt with Sherlock Moriarty's case of self-defense.
I think Jurgen mentioned his name. Sergeant Faxine? Well, I can receive the 10-pound bail tomorrow or the next day. What is he doing here? Did MI9 send him to find Ian Wright? Or to inform me that I should temporarily hide away from danger?
Confused, Klein grabbed the handle. Inside the Intis embassy of Backland's West Borough, the lights were on, the scent of various perfumes and alcohol, accompanied by melodious melodies, stretched out to every corner. A ball was being held. During his years as an ambassador, Bakerland had often held balls at the embassy, inviting the kingdom's bankers, big factory owners, philanthropists, and other well-known, rich and powerful people, as well as lawyers. Random opportunities were also given to some of the lower-ranked merchants. In this atmosphere, he would tell the guests about the prosperity and openness of Trier, and how the Intis Republic was no longer dominated by the likes of the nobles, bankers, factory owners, and lawyers. They, directly and indirectly, took over a large portion of the parliamentary seats, determining the direction of the government policies, enjoying true freedom and high statuses. Today, Bakerland was doing the same thing. With a wineglass in hand, he flitted around the guests, as if to prove that he was present at the ball without leaving.
They should have gotten the manuscript by now. After learning that Ian Wright appeared at the telegraph office from that trembling detective, I've been putting plans into action. Now is the time to reap the rewards.
Bakerland, with his thin but classy face, took a sip of the blood-like Ormir wine and headed for the balcony, intending to take a breath of the cool night air. After learning that Ian had sent the telegram, as a veteran conspiracist and professional intelligence officer, Bakerland was acutely aware that Ian was contacting his superior's superior. Therefore, he quickly made the double spy that had infiltrated the Fasak Empire's Backland intelligence team investigate and obtain the meeting time, location, and manner agreed upon by Ian and the team leader. After that, he pretended that nothing had happened and continued to send people to look for Ian near Bacardi Street. He successfully found Ian and also attracted the attention of MI9. According to his plan, his intelligence officer had deliberately let Ian go so that MI9 would think that they were on the same starting line. After paralyzing his main opponent, he called in other unexposed intelligence agents to ambush Ian and the Fasak Empire's team leader. He wanted to find the manuscript and smuggle it out of the Lowen Kingdom without being detected by the MI9. The situation had progressed as smoothly as he had expected, but the news that came back in the evening left his heart heavy. People from MI9 had actually appeared. They had appeared despite being supposedly fooled.
With Rozago around, it's definitely not because of divination. Besides, MI9 isn't good at divination at all. That means we have a spy among our ranks. Let's hope that Rozago can be one step ahead of them. and grabbed the manuscript to hand over to Shadow for extraction.
Bakerland had deliberately organized the ball in order to avoid suspicion, but as such, he was unable to involve himself with the developments. All he could do was pray that his subordinates would amount to something. According to his plans, once Rosago succeeded, he would immediately transfer the items to another intelligence officer, one that had never been activated before. Then Rosago would lure MI9 away and, by creating some trouble, keep them out of sight and distract them from his partner. During this process, Bakerland requested Rosago to kill the detective while he was at it.
If it wasn't for him, no one from MI9 would have known about it. Everything would have gone smoothly. My involvement with the Zemanger gang wouldn't have been revealed, and I wouldn't be transferred back to the country. He actually didn't run away, thinking that MI9 would keep protecting him and that staying at home is safer than running away.
Bakerland rubbed his face. He had already received orders that after the operation regarding the manuscript had been completed, and he would hand all intelligence matters to the highest-ranking military officer at the embassy and await the arrival of the new ambassador. Bakerland was rather reluctant to part with Backland. Despite the bad weather and heavy pollution, Backland was one of the most prosperous cities in the world.
Besides, the ladies here are more conservative, unlike those sluts back home. Slowly seducing them into bed and removing their restraint, bit by bit, is a very satisfying and fascinating achievement. Unfortunately, I have to bid farewell to these beautiful ladies.
Bakerland thought gloomily, and he felt more and more resentful of the detective who dared to put up resistance. As for Rosago's own safety, Bakerland wasn't worried at all. He believed that as long as Rosago wanted to, as long as he wasn't targeted by a high-sequence Beyonder, he would be able to escape immediately. This was because Rosago had special Beyonder powers. As he lost himself in thought, Bakerland's eyes suddenly lit up. He saw a young lady in a crimson dress standing at the edge of the balcony with a glass of wine in her hand. She had a pretty face and a gentle temperament. Her hair was ink-black and luxuriant, and her light brown eyes seemed to speak volumes. Bakerland went over at once and began to chat with her. He learned that the lady was the daughter of a timber merchant named Eileen, and that her father wasn't very rich and was trying to make his way up the ranks. With his status as Intis ambassador, Bakerland quickly received Eileen's affection. After sharing 2 dances, their bodies became more intimate.
Beautiful lady, I'd like to invite you to my room to sample some Ormir wine of 1286.
Eileen replied, almost without any hesitation.
All right.
The two of them left the ballroom and secretly went to the 2nd floor. They entered Bakerland's room, and he ordered the guards to stay away from them and not to disturb him. Before the so-called Ormir wine 1286 appeared, Bakerland had passionately brought Eileen to the bed. While romping around in bed, Eileen's simple skirt came undone as her pure, fair arms hugged him. While her hands gripped Bakerland's shoulders, her nails and veins suddenly sprouted black, thin, fluffy spider feet. Bang! Eileen's eyes suddenly bulged as white foam poured out of her mouth. Bakerland retracted the fist that he had used to hit her abdomen and stood up from the bed. He no longer had the hasty actions from before and instead wore a cold expression. Bakerland asked in a deep voice,
Who sent you?
Eileen attempted to stand up, but the pain was too much to bear. Her eyes were filled with shock and fear. Seeing the expression on the pretty girl's face, Bakerland smiled and said,
It's true that I'm into beautiful ladies, but I know this problem of mine. So every time I meet a beautiful lady, I'm especially careful. Speak, who sent you? Don't bother resisting. I'm very good at using fire.
Chapter 249, The Assassination. Eileen clamped her mouth shut and angrily looked at the thin, smiling face of the ambassador with a touch of terror. Bakerland stretched out his right hand, which was covered in a plume of orange flames that danced silently. He took 2 steps forward, making a gesture as if he was pressing his palm against Eileen's skin. This made Eileen think of the descriptions in many novels in which cruel interrogators would use red-hot iron to brand their target's body, bringing about an extremely painful experience.
No, I can't be that brutal to such a beautiful lady.
Bakerland suddenly stopped his outstretched right palm and chuckled softly. He shook suddenly, turning the orange flame into a long red whip. The long whip ignited the air around it, which took on the form of thorns. Pow! Bakerland lashed his flaming whip at Eileen, burning her clothes and leaving a dark mark on her skin. Her face contorted as she screamed. "Mess!" Bakerland asked again in a gentle voice.
Who sent you?
Eileen's lips quivered a few times before she finally opened them.
It was.
As Bakerland subconsciously listened for the answer, his eyes suddenly turned bloodshot. "Oh, no!" Bakerland jerked back and rolled to the ground. In the spot where he had been standing, a flame rose up and formed a wall of fire. Splat! 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 Rain-like blood and flesh splattered against the wall and produced sizzling sounds. Some of them penetrated the flame, leaving a thin trail of blood on the ground. At the end of this path was the Intis ambassador, Bakerland, who had stood up once again. He saw that Eileen's abdomen had been torn open, and 2 arms wrapped in viscous liquid were sticking out from inside. With a sudden push of the 2 arms, a figure drilled its way out from the belly of the beautiful Eileen. It was covered in a thick, squirming, blood-red liquid that continuously dripped down, and it was about the size of an adult male. It was hard to imagine that a normal woman like Eileen, with no protrusion in her abdomen, would actually have such a thing hidden inside her body. How was it stored in there? Boom! The body below Eileen's head exploded completely, turning into pure flesh and blood, surging into the form of a humanoid figure, and mixing with the dripping liquid to turn into a strange red robe. The figure revealed its true appearance. It was so beautiful that it looked like a woman. The blood-red robe it wore looked like a blossoming flower under the illumination of the flames.
Rose Bishop.
As a veteran intelligence officer, Bakerland immediately identified the name of the corresponding sequence before him. Sequence 6 of the secret suppliant pathway, Rose Bishop. Every Rose Bishop was an expert when it came to flesh and blood magic. Beyonders at this sequence could hide inside the bodies of others, thereby avoiding all sorts of investigations. But the moment they emerge, the hosts would lose their lives.
For the Lord?
Eileen's remaining head let out a low cry and closed her eyes forever. The Rose Bishop stretched out its right hand and tapped its chest 4 times in the order of bottom to top, right to left. With the color of blood and the light from the flames reflecting in his eyes, he looked at Bakerland and took a sudden step forward with his right foot, passing through the wall of fire. He didn't receive any damage from the fire, with only dark red liquid that continuously dripped down. Bakerland retreated once again as he suddenly raised his voice.
Someone, help me!
Although his most capable assistant, Rosago, and several intelligence agents had been sent on a mission, there was still no lack of beyonders in the embassy. They were military officials who had received permission from the Loan Kingdom. They were the defensive forces that were available. 1 sequence 5, 1 sequence 6, 3 sequence 7s, and a combination of nearly 10 sequence 8s and 9s. Bakerland's voice echoed around the room, but it didn't exit the premises. The music outside didn't stop, and the ball continued. It was as though the room had become a completely isolated world. Bakerland stopped his shouting, narrowed his eyes, and looked around.
This.
The Rose Bishop was in no hurry to act, he said with a chuckle.
It was by your own will, the rules that were decided by yourself. You told the guards not to disturb you, or come near, or let anyone close, yes. I simply magnified your will and rules and made a slight distortion. If you want to escape this isolation, you have to defeat yourself.
Bakerland's expression changed slightly. What appeared to be the compliance of rules was, in fact, a distortion of them. The characteristic of using the power of authority to serve oneself made him think of another sequence's name.
Baron of Corruption.
Bakerland growled. This was the lawyer pathway, which was sequence 6 of the Black Emperor pathway. Before he could finish his sentence, Bakerland's face suddenly turned extremely gloomy as he blurted out,
Shepherd, you're a shepherd. Who are you from the Aurora Order? Mr. A, why are you assassinating me?
"The Rose Bishop? No," Shepherd chuckled.
You don't need to know who I am. Accept the Lord's blessings.
His body suddenly stiffened before he could finish his sentence. It was as though his joints were covered in rust, and he seemed to have turned into a puppet. Bakerland laughed rapturously. The gloominess from before disappeared in an instant. He took out a white handkerchief from his left breast pocket and wiped the corner of his mouth.
I'm glad that you were able to chat with me for so long. It gave me enough time.
After the white handkerchief was taken away, a thumb-sized head emerged from his left breast pocket. It was the head of a puppet with completely black eyes. The shepherd opened his mouth and was about to speak when he heard a hollow voice that seemed to come from afar.
You.
After pausing, his body suddenly burgeoned and his skin turned dark. Two curved goat horns with strange, sinister patterns sprouted from his head, as well as wings behind his back that reeked of sulfur when they flapped. The shepherd instantly moved 3 meters forward, having transformed into a devil-like creature. But even so, it was as if every one of his joints was firmly shackled. His movements were stiff and slow, and his thoughts were starting to blur.
You still have the power of the devil? As expected of a shepherd, let me send you to your lord.
Without further ado, a flaming long spear with a blazing white tip materialized in the middle of Bakerland's right palm. He bent his back, about to throw the spear to pin the shepherd to the wall and burn him to ashes. Sequence 7, Pyromaniac of the Conspirer Pathway, had the ancient name Fire Mage. Cough, 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 cough. At that moment, Bakerland began to cough violently, coughing so hard that he felt as if he was about to spit out his heart and lungs. His flaming spear lost control from his coughing and disappeared, inch by inch. His face flushed red and his forehead was scorching hot from his coughing fit. His influence on his enemy that he derived from a mystical item was lifted. The shepherd was freed from his sluggishness and returned to normal. The devilish face asked with the corners of his mouth hooked,
Why do you think I was having such a long chat with you? How does severe pneumonia and an unstoppable cough feel like?
Upon hearing these words, Bakerland suddenly recalled the enemy's beautiful and enchanting appearance when he first appeared, and regretfully said,
Cough, cough, a disease. You, cough, cough, killed a cough, 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 a demoness of affliction.
The shepherd dispelled his devil-like form as his figure turned into a series of stacked after-images. He chuckled and said,
No, I only received a gift from Saint Tenebros. I know conspirers have all sorts of means available to them, so I'll be using my strongest ability now, so that you won't have any unnecessary hope.
A book appeared before him, a translucent and blurry book. The ancient book flipped rapidly and with a soft chant.
I came, I saw, I record. As long as I have recorded it, I'll be able to use it once. This is an ability that Saint Tenebros had deliberately demonstrated to me. Although I only have half of its original effect, it's still enough.
The shepherd's voice turned hollow, and his body was enveloped by the darkness that spewed out from the book. He quickly turned into a small giant, about 2.3 to 2.4 meters tall. His entire body was covered in cold, black armor. At the space where his eyes should be, there were 2 glowing crimson-red blobs. The Dark Knight raised a broadsword in his hands, took a step forward, and delivered an unrelenting chop.
No! Why?
As Bakerland tragically screamed, the layers of flames that gushed out of his body were split apart. All sorts of lights exploded and were split open, and his body was split into 2 halves. Thud! Bakerland fell to the ground. No blood came out of his massive wound. Even his soul seemed to be corroded and destroyed by the black sword that didn't seem to exist. Boom! 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 The plumes of fire that spewed out of Bakerland's body lost control, causing the blast that shook the room and sent the glass rattling. And at that moment, the isolation that had been created by his own will vanished with his death. The shepherd didn't stop, nor did he wait for the Beyonder characteristic to appear. He restored his inconspicuous appearance and seized the opportunity before the military officials of the embassy arrived, sprinting through the layers of walls and into the darkness outside. At 15 Minsk Street, Klein paused with his right hand on the handle. He decided to throw a coin before he opened the door. Since Ian had already come, the revelation that he had seen in the dream had already happened. That meant that danger could come at any moment. While muttering the words, "The visitor outside will bring danger," Klein flicked up a quarter pence and watched it fall to his palm, its number side facing up.
Negative.
Klein muttered to himself as he reached for the handle. However, he didn't let his guard down. He knew that there was a mid-sequence Beyonder of the same pathway as him on the ambassador's side who could interfere with his divination. If it was that person, it would be normal for him to get the wrong result.
It's a pity that I don't have the time or an opportunity to investigate it above the gray fog.
Klein looked through the door for a moment with his spirit vision. Realizing that nothing was amiss, he opened the door and took 2 steps back. Dressed in a black and white checkered uniform, Sergeant Faxine took off his hat and said with a serious expression,
I've been sent by the higher-ups to tell you that you must be careful tonight and tomorrow. Be careful of strangers.
Chapter 250, Rich Experience in Courting Death.
All right.
Klein nodded solemnly. Sergeant Faxine touched his short hair and said,
There are other arrangements. I'll explain them to you in detail, and you can decide on your own.
He cast his gaze towards the living room. Klein made a polite gesture of invitation, then watched as Sergeant Faxine closed the door behind him, walked over to the sofa, and sat down.
What are your plans?
Klein kept his coat on, hands still in his pockets. Faxine leaned forward slightly, clasped his hands, and said,
You should be well aware that you have offended that ambassador. Tonight or tomorrow will be the most dangerous period for you. The higher-ups have given you 3 choices. The first is to go to the Holy Wind Cathedral for 2 days. I know that you're a believer of the god of steam and machinery, but St. Ireland Cathedral is too far, and it's easy for trouble to arise on the way there.
Klein nodded indiscernibly and waited for the sergeant to give him the second choice. Suddenly, his vision blurred and his head went numb. He felt as if there was a layer of thick glass around him. He saw that Sergeant Faxine's opening and closing of his mouth was slowing down, and he noticed that his thoughts had become sluggish. This feeling was very familiar. Klein suddenly thought of the puppet from the Antigonus family, sealed artifact 2049. Back then, he was repeatedly affected in a similar way, but he had been awakened by Captain Dunsmith and the others. To ensure that the others could detect any abnormalities in a timely manner, they kept stretching and retracting their arms.
The Antigonus family holds the seer pathway. This person's ability is similar to the Antigonus family's puppet. He is the mid-sequence Beyonder of the seer pathway. As expected, it's him.
Klein came to his senses, but there was no Dunsmith to wake him. The muscles on Officer Faxine's face started squirming. Soon he turned into a gentleman with black hair and blue eyes. He had a handsome face and a tiny stubble. He said with a smile,
Given time, this is one of the most difficult abilities to deal with for anyone that isn't a high-sequence Beyonder.
As he spoke, Klein saw the image of the woman in the black regal dress appear in the glass of the oriel window. She walked slowly and stiffly out of the glass. Her blonde hair, her delicate face, and her pale face made her seem more like a doll than a living person.
I never thought that you would be able to hire such a powerful bodyguard. If it wasn't for my divination ahead of time, I might have died here. What kind of compensation did you pay? By the way, my name is Rosago.
Rosago didn't look back as he continued smiling at Klein, but he didn't expect a fluent answer from the man he controlled. At that moment, he suddenly felt a cold breeze blow across his neck, causing his hair to stand on end as goosebumps appeared all over his body. There seemed to be an invisible person at his back, breathing down his neck. Rosago laughed, raised his left hand, and snapped his fingers. Pow! Flames suddenly soared up from his back, and a transparent shadow was set ablaze, quickly turning into ashes. In Klein's vision, these motions were all broken down into a grid of images. This wasn't because his opponent had turned slow, but was a result of his increasingly sluggish thoughts.
He already has me under control. Why isn't he directly killing me? Do all villains like to engage in lengthy monologues? No, he's not stupid. He's trying to conceal something with this discussion.
Klein tried to think, to figure out the problem, but his thoughts were moving at an irresistibly slow pace. He looked intently at Rosago, taking in every detail of his. Finally, he saw a figure in each of Rosago's eyes, a figure with blonde hair, blue eyes, a pale face, and a dark black Gothic regal dress. And at this moment, the woman was still behind Rosago. She was still near the oriel window, walking towards him like a manipulated puppet.
He hasn't really controlled her yet. She's still trying to resist and struggle. They are tussling in the realm of mystery. I need to do something. I need to tip the scales of balance.
Klein turned his attention to the language of foulness charm he was holding in his left hand. It was cold and slippery, filled with evil. He was glad that he hadn't let down his guard and maintained a battle-ready state the entire time.
He could only injure himself to injure his opponent.
Klein gathered his strength and struggled to speak. His vocal cords seemed to have rotted, and his throat squirmed in difficulty. He hoarsely said in ancient Hermes, with a staccato rhythm,
Foulness.
As his voice echoed in the air, Klein felt a corrosive pain in his left palm, and he heard illusory whispers that could drive a person mad. This was a state that he was familiar with, and it didn't affect his subsequent attempts. The attempt was to inject most of his spirituality into the language of foulness charm, which didn't require the control of his body. In 3 seconds, the voice of the true creator would descend upon the physical world and burrow into the ears of the creature closest to him. 3. The prelude, the din, the illusory, the evil whispers spread out in an instant. Klein felt his scalp tingle, his mind abuzz, his veins throbbing. He found it difficult to focus his mind. A coffee table away from him, Rosago's expression had suddenly turned adrift. His face swelled up as the woman's figure and his eyes suddenly became clearer. 2. The pale woman in the black regal dress behind him quickened her actions, but soon she frowned in pain. At this moment, Klein felt the weakening of the influence as he wished, regaining his smooth thought processes, and felt as though his joints were once again filled with lubricant. Having experienced ravings all this time, he endured the madness and pain, quickly pulling out and throwing the language of foulness charm from his left palm at Rosago. 1. The iron-black charm, with its many symbols and sinister-looking patterns, melted. Rosago had just regained some of his composure and was trying to leap to the side when he saw a rich darkness and heard a murmur that contained immense knowledge and extreme madness. No human being was able to describe such a sound. All the veins in Rosago's head protruded as if they were about to explode. He tumbled to the ground, writhing and struggling as his skin ruptured, inch by inch, revealing the flesh underneath. At the same time, Klein and the blonde woman with blue eyes also failed to resist the pain as they fell to the ground. Each of them let out tragic screams. The excruciating pain felt like someone had stabbed their temples with a drill rod. Their eyes turned bloodshot as red liquid ran down their noses. They could neither see nor feel the outside world. The experienced Klein was the first to recover. He staggered to his feet and saw that Rosago had torn off his clothes and stripped off his skin, exposing his flesh and veins. He was like a legendary red monster that had been skinned. He constantly tumbled around the ground while groaning in pain, as if he was about to lose control. Klein didn't wait for the result, because he couldn't afford the possibility of the other party gaining the benefits, as well as becoming a devotee of the true creator. He believed that the evil god was definitely infuriated as well. Pulling out his revolver and adjusting the barrel to the firing position, Klein took 2 steps forward, circled around the coffee table, and put the muzzle of his gun against Rosago's head. Bang! 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 Dressed in his black, double-breasted suit, He stared at his enemy intently as he shot 5 rounds in a row, watching his enemy's head swell and explode into a mixture of red, white, and black that splattered all over the floor.
Captain, thank you for demonstrating this to me before.
Klein panted while he lowered his revolver before he beamed brightly. In front of him, Rosago's headless corpse faltered a little before collapsing to the side of the sofa. Only then did the woman in the black Gothic regal dress stop her screams. Her struggles and rolling slowed down, but her skin seemed to turn a lot more translucent. Seeing the flesh on Rosago's corpse squirm, Klein didn't hesitate to use his self-created requiem charm. Under the calm and serene atmosphere, the corpse finally stopped moving. Upon seeing this scene, Klein thought of something. He took out another charm and chanted in a low voice,
Crimson!
Then he injected some of his spirituality into it and threw this charm at his bodyguard, the woman with the pale golden hair and pale white face. As the slumbering powers emanated, the woman, who was still weakened under the effect of the lingering voices, instantly quietened down as she fell into a deep slumber. Just to be sure, Klein threw another slumber charm, afraid that he would be interrupted during what he was planning to do next. 15 Minsk Street once again had its peace. This time, nothing was broken, only the ground was contaminated as the fight between the 3 parties was mystical and beyond the physical realm. Looking at Rosago's corpse and then at his sleeping bodyguard, Klein mocked himself.
It's also good to court death often. At least I gained some immunity.
He didn't attempt the mediumship ritual immediately because Rosago was now tainted by the true creator, and directly communicating with the spirit was tantamount to committing suicide. But that didn't mean Klein had no choice. He planned on doing the mediumship above the gray fog by bringing Rosago with him. With his current spirit body's level, even with the augmentation provided by Azek's copper whistle, he was unable to move a portable camera, much less a corpse that was several times heavier. However, mediumship wasn't done with a corpse, but the channeling of the remnant spirituality. Klein took out a candle, quickly set up a ritual ceremony, summoned himself, and responded to himself, turning into a special spirit body. After becoming a spirit, he saw the distinct remnants of Rosago's spirituality, and he realized that Miss Bodyguard's physical condition was a little strange. She was actually in quite a similar state as he was, but there were also great differences. Without wasting any time thinking, Klein carried Azek's copper whistle, wrapped the remaining of Rosago's spirituality, and entered above the gray fog. After conjuring the appropriate ritual items and setting up a simple altar, Klein quickly began the mediumship ritual. During this process, he was shocked to discover that he no longer needed to pray to anyone to be able to directly communicate with the spirit. It was like he was a real spirit medium.
Phew. Is this some special power that I possess in the mysterious space above the gray fog?
A thought flashed through Klein's mind as he began to recite the divination statement.
The potion formulas for the seer pathway